On the 23rd of October, Jack Dorsey, who is the CEO of Twitter, put out an ominous tweet suggesting that he believes hyperinflation is just around the corner. And then earlier this year, before the man disappeared off Twitter altogether, Burry, who is famous for predicting the 2008 housing shortages and the global recession, he also suggested the same thing. And he said that when hyperinflation hits, which he believes is coming soon, it's going to be the downfall of America. So if they are right, and this is something that is coming onto our doorstep, this could be quite the challenging time. So I know that economics might not be the most interesting subject and some people might think of it as quite stale. However, when you look at it through the lens of history, it's really interesting and it can give you some sort of an idea of what could potentially happen. And it doesn't arrive by itself. It brings a lot of baggage along, and sometimes this baggage looks like food shortages, currency collapse, social unrest, and sometimes it has led to wars. So in this video, I'm going to try to do two things. Firstly, try to explain what hyperinflation is. More or less, it's the angrier, scarier version of inflation. And then secondly, just some things that might be useful for you to implement into your own life to prepare for said scenario. And if none of this happens and we're not hit with hyperinflation, these things just in general are really good to have because it just makes you feel so secure anyway. So with that all being said, let's get into it, shall we? Firstly, in as simple terms as possible, I'm going to aim to explain what inflation is and then move on to hyperinflation. Basically, I'm sure for yourself, you've noticed that things over time just become a little bit more and more expensive. For myself, when I was a little girl, I remember, I think fuel prices were about 60 cents a litre. And now, 25 years on, roughly, we're looking at fuel being around $1.90 Australian per litre. That's a significant difference. And it's not like I'm getting more fuel, petrol. I'm getting still 1 litre, but I'm just paying that much more. And this is inflation, when things gradually go up in price over time. And there's a lot of factors that could lead to this. Firstly, people might want to get paid more, which also then increases the goods and services around it. Secondly, it could be because society is becoming wealthier, there's an increase in taxes, and there might be more money circulating in the economy. But for us today in 2021, the reason for the inflation that we are already seeing is because there has been so much more money printed in the last 2 years. When a country is going into serious debt or it's experiencing hardship or a crisis, one thing that a country's government can do is to make more money. Basically, to physically print or digitally create more cash and pump it into circulation. This can help stimulate a country's economy and help it get out of a crisis. But a dangerous side effect is that it can also cause that currency to become more devalued as more of that currency is created. This can lead to a serious increase in inflation. As I'm sure you're aware, and I don't have to explain it, the world has been going through quite the turmoil period over the last 2 years. Bit of a crisis going on, and with that, the governments have been printing a lot more money to try to deal with this. In the United States, for example, more money was printed in 1 month last year than was created in the first 200 years of the country's history. And earlier this year, it was announced that 40% of all American dollars that have ever been created were printed in just 1 year. Okay, basically, an insane amount of money has been printed in the last year or so, and that means that every single dollar out there is just not worth as much anymore. Let's look at it this way. So there is this fancy car that some of you might have seen in James Bond movies from the 1963 Aston Martin DB5 manual, which I just went on. And in Australia, there's one going for $1,695,000. Now this car is beautiful. It is rare. And this is why the price is so expensive. It is a beautiful machine. Now imagine though, if all of a sudden they decided to recreate it and put 10,000 of the exact same model into society, the price of that car would go down because it's not as valuable anymore because it's not as rare. Basically, this is exactly what's happening with money around the world and certain currencies around the world because there is so much more being put into circulation. Lots of governments are just printing, meaning that the value of those dollars are just going down and everything else around it is going up in price. It was announced that inflation has hit 6.2% in the US, meaning that things now cost 6.2% more than they did at the same time a year before. According to statistics, this is the biggest increase in inflation we've seen for over 30 years. Now this gets me onto the topic of hyperinflation, which is much worse than inflation. Imagine if a currency becomes so devalued that instead of using a $10 note to buy something, you actually have to use a $100 trillion note, and the $100 trillion note is only enough to buy you a chocolate bar. Well, that's exactly what happened in Zimbabwe. In 2015, the currency had become so inflated that $100 trillion notes were in regular circulation. At the time, 250 trillion Zimbabwe dollars was only worth about $1. The people of Zimbabwe lost almost all ability to easily trade within their country, and their money became totally worthless to the outside world. It also caused widespread starvation and almost total economic collapse. And according to people like Burry, he believes that hyperinflation is coming to places like America and other parts of the world. How to protect yourself. Okay, I don't like the doomsday stuff very much. I don't like to feel in a state of panic, but there are signs showing us that this could be where we're going. And I really believe that preparing yourself for eventualities is a really great way to go. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. The thing with hyperinflation preparation is this is something you have to do in advance. If the turd hits the fan, it might be too late for you to do this. So preparing in advance is the key. Now, I'm going to give you some strategies that I am doing for myself personally, but this is not financial advice at all. So seek out for yourself professional financial advice so that they know what your personal situation is. Number one, buy precious metals. This is the very first thing I want to start off with, because if hyperinflation is to hit, let's say in America, and the US dollar becomes completely devalued, it means that within America itself, that dollar doesn't really mean anything. And then you also lose your ability to buy anything from overseas because outside currencies will see the US dollar as basically worthless. But what is recognized as something valuable throughout basically more or less the entire world, this is where silver and gold come into the picture. During hyperinflation in the 1920s in Germany, the German currency became so devalued that it would have taken 100 trillion marks to buy just one US dollar. Because of this, people who owned gold and silver were more easily able to trade and get the things they needed than those who only had paper money. And in case your country does go into hyperinflation and you decide to get the heck out of there and live somewhere else, you should be able to trade your way out and buy your way out if you have gold and silver. Throughout history, gold and silver has been used for a few thousand years. It's the longest standing currency and is recognized by so many different countries. It has stood the test of time, and this is why it's a good option to potentially consider investing and buying yourself some precious metals. But how do you get your hands on precious metals? Well, in big cities around the world, it is often that you can find a precious metal dealer that you can buy a little bit of gold and silver from. Depends on what you're able to do. Not sure how much you're going to need, but whatever you can afford is probably better than having none at all. Now, if you prefer to buy online, I've recently started using Gold Avenue, which allows you to buy precious metals and have them stored in Swiss vaults. And if you live in Europe, they'll also ship to your home. I'll put a link down below if you want to check out Gold Avenue. I love the idea of having precious metals in vaults because, you know, if you have a bigger chunk of precious metals, it might be good to have it very safely stored within vaults, but also having some on your possession is also great. Some people are saying it might be better to have smaller amounts, like small coins or little tearaway pieces of gold and silver, so that you can start trading that, because sometimes it might be harder to just buy a piece of bread with a giant gold brick. Diversify your cash reserves. Another way to prepare yourself in case hyperinflation does hit your country is to diversify your cash reserves. As I mentioned before, if all of your money is sitting in one particular currency and that currency becomes devalued, it means that all of your savings might end up being worth nothing. However, if you have multiple currencies, it might help you to seriously reduce the potential risk. For example, let's say that you have your savings distributed across 3 different currencies. So let's say the euro, the US dollar, and the Japanese yen. Let's say that the US dollar collapses. Then it would mean that you're only losing 1/3 of your savings rather than all of that. Many banks will allow you to have what's called a multi-currency account. With one of my banks in Iceland, for example, I have 3 different accounts in 3 different currencies: Icelandic krona, the euro, and the US dollar. Chances are your bank should be able to do this, and you should be able to just switch up your money into different currencies quite easily. If your bank doesn't offer this, there are digital-only banks such as Wise or Revolut that allow you to hold your money in the bank in multiple currencies. So you can check that out. It's quite easy to do. Have the ability to grow your own food. This is one of my favorite things to talk about because it's honestly magic. I mean, humans, we're meant to be growing our own food anyway. Have you also ever seen a seed grow into a full plant? It's going to blow your mind. If hyperinflation does hit, there is a potential of food shortages. History has shown us this. And this could be happening because of supply chain disturbances or because people are hoarding specific items. And we did see this happen as well at the beginning of this current turmoil that we're in, where people were hoarding toilet paper It wasn't very pretty, was it? You can't eat money, so investing and having some sort of a backup in food supply is great, because essentially when you have food growing, or you have a stash of food, it essentially means that you've printed your own money, which is just incredible. And to think that this couldn't happen in today's society, well, over the last 100 years, we've seen this happen in different areas of the world. So it's not like it's impossible for it to happen, even though I know it sounds pretty doomsday. It's pretty sad. But as I said, growing your own food is really satisfying. So it's a fun experiment anyway. So if it is growing your own food or learning what wild foods around you can cultivate and you can eat, that is awesome. One thing to consider when you are buying seeds for food production, it's important not to buy seeds marked as F1 seeds. Food grown from F1 seeds is only single generation food, meaning if you grow a tomato, you won't be able to plant the seeds from the tomato to grow more food. In short, you'll only get one batch of food and then it's game over. Get a better mortgage. Lastly, if you are a homeowner, I think it's really important to just have a really quick squeeze at what type of a mortgage you have. Because if hyperinflation hits, it could mean that you are going to have really difficult repayments to make, or you will lose your home. This is because most people hold their home loans within a variable interest rate loan or an adjustable rate mortgage. Basically, it means that your interest rate or your repayments are going to fluctuate as the economy is also fluctuating. So if inflation hits, your loan amount goes up or your interest repayments goes up. And in the case of hyperinflation, this could be a huge jump. And for a lot of people, it's just unrealistic to pay those huge amounts back to the bank. And that could mean that you would lose your house. In general, this isn't the case with a fixed loan because it doesn't fluctuate according to any inflation. If you have a fixed interest rate loan and hyperinflation does hit, this could be a good position for you. For example, let's say hyperinflation wrecks the value of your currency and within a few months the price of an apple is $10,000. At the same time, you have $250,000 to pay left on your mortgage. But because your mortgage is fixed, your interest payments or the amount of your loan aren't affected by hyperinflation. In this case, you would literally be able to walk into your bank and pay off your mortgage for the price of 25 apples, owning your home outright. Now, this might sound improbable to some of you. However, in places such as Romania and Hungary, there has been a case of extreme inflation over the last 100 years. And that means that a lot of people were able to actually pay off their houses a lot faster. So for this reason, it might be wise to talk to your bank and just find out what is a secure loan that will not be changed according to inflation. Now, I understand not everybody watching is a homeowner. However, I'm sure you know somebody that is a homeowner with a mortgage, so it might be worthwhile to share this information with them as well. Lastly, let's talk about community. Community is so important. During any time, we are social beings. We are meant to be part of a community. However, a lot of us like to think that we're individual beings in this society that we've created right now. If you are fine, but society around you or your community is not fine, you cannot bubble wrap yourself away from those problems. You have to ensure that your community is also taken care of. So your friends, your family, your community, local community. If things happen to go sour, you know, you've got each other's backs and we can't get out of any situations, like really difficult situations in life by ourselves. I know it's a heavy topic. It's not the nicest. As I said, this can be also a game if you prepare for it and you think about this in advance rather than last second when panic might strike. It's just reassuring. It's just quite nice. So thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy it and if you think this message is important to get out to people, please make sure that you share, comment down below, like, it helps the algorithm immensely. Secondly, we have an amazing newsletter with extra lessons on all things finance freedom, global citizenships and so forth. So sign up, link in bio, and don't forget we have that epic Black Friday promo as well. Don't miss out, only a few days to go. Okay, and I'll see you in the next one.